July 8, 1969, Tanglewood Music Center, Lenox, Massachusetts, the Berkshire Hills. Summer, the home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, one of the most prestigious classical music venues in America, the place where Leonard Bernstein had conducted, where Seiji Ozawa would lead, where the most serious music in the country was played in an outdoor pavilion while the audience sat on the lawn and watched the stars come out. Janis Joplin was about to take the stage. She was backstage. The audience of nearly 8,000 people, an enormous crowd for a venue that had been designed around the genteel traditions of classical music, was getting restless. The Tuesday night concert series that had brought contemporary musicians to Tanglewood was still a relatively new experiment. The previous year it had started cautiously with acts that felt safe. Now, in the summer of 1969, they had Janis Joplin. She looked out from the wings. The state police officers who had been assigned to provide security for the event were positioned at the front of the stage. Along the edge of the stage, in the aisles near the front, the standard security formation for a large outdoor concert. She was not going on. Not until they moved. This is a story about the same person who, 3 months later, would be arrested in Tampa for saying, "Don't fuck with those people," into a microphone. But in Tampa, she was already on stage when the police acted. At Tanglewood, she hadn't even walked out yet. At Tanglewood, she made the decision before the confrontation could happen. She looked at the state police officers standing at the edge of the stage, and she said, to whoever was managing the event that evening, "They need to move. Their presence would ruin the mood of my performance. I'm not going on until they're gone from the front." This was not a public declaration. There was no microphone. There was no audience watching. This was a private conversation backstage, a woman refusing to perform unless a condition was met. The condition was, the police leave the front. The people managing the concert looked at the state police. They looked at the 8,000 people who had come to hear Janis Joplin and were getting restless. They made a calculation. Reluctantly, the police complied. They moved back from the stage front. They repositioned themselves to the sides and rear of the venue. The space in front of the stage, the space between the audience and the performer, was cleared. Janis Joplin walked out onto the stage. Here is why this matters as a specific act of will. In Tampa, the police were already in the room when she got there. They had been placed there by the venue. She could have accepted it, done her show, said nothing. Instead, she spoke publicly and got arrested. At Tanglewood, she had a choice. She could have looked at the police at the stage front and said, "Fine, that's just how it is here. This is a classical music venue. These are Massachusetts State Police. I'm a rock singer from Texas. I'll do my show and go home." Instead, she said, "No, not loudly, not publicly, not in a way that anyone in the audience could hear." She just said, "Not until they move." And she waited, and they moved. That is a different kind of courage than Tampa. Tampa was public, loud, immediate, consequential. Tanglewood was quiet, private, deliberate, and it worked. She had learned something maybe about how power operates. Sometimes you don't need to shout into a microphone. Sometimes you just need to not walk through the door. Tanglewood was an unlikely venue for Janis Joplin in every possible way. The Music Center had been founded in 1937 as the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. The shed, the main performance pavilion, was designed for orchestral music. The lawn concerts, where audiences spread blankets and listened to Beethoven under the stars, were a Berkshire tradition that stretched back decades. The Contemporary Music Tuesday series had been added with some trepidation. The first year, 1968, it had worked well enough. In 1969, they had scheduled 5 Tuesday night concerts. The Janis Joplin show was the first. The opening night of the series, Janis Joplin and her Cosmic Blues Band, at Tanglewood. The audience that arrived was nearly 8,000 people, a number that would set an attendance record for the entire 1969 Tanglewood season. Not for any of the symphony programs. For the Tuesday Night Contemporary series opener, for Janis Joplin, there is a photograph that exists of Janis Joplin standing with Eric Leinsdorf, the conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, taken during her time at Tanglewood. The two of them together, the conductor in his formal wear and the rock singer in her feathers and beads. Whatever Leinsdorf thought about the temporary takeover of his venue, he apparently stood for a photograph with her. She was, in her own way, also a serious musician. She just happened to be a serious musician who refused to perform until the police backed away from her audience. The show was reviewed by a critic as a superstar of rock, serving up blues with a screaming urgency. The 8,000 people who had come demanded 2 encores. During the encores, something happened that did not often happen at Tanglewood. Fans rushed the stage. Not violently, with the specific joy of people who have been given permission to feel something and are not going to waste it. They pressed toward the stage, they reached up, and Janis Joplin, who had refused to take the stage until the police moved away from the front, leaned down from the stage and pulled one of them up. A fan, onto the stage, to dance, at Tanglewood, where Leonard Bernstein had conducted. She pulled a fan on stage to dance. The crowd went even wilder. The state police, who had been moved to the sides and rear of the venue, watched. 3 months later, she would be arrested in Tampa for saying 4 words into a microphone. At Tanglewood, she said nothing into a microphone. She simply refused to walk through the door until the conditions were right. Both times, she was doing the same thing, insisting that the space between herself and her audience belonged to the music, not to authority, not to the institution, not to whoever had decided how concerts were supposed to work, to the music. And then, when the music was happening, when she had created the conditions she needed, she gave everything. 2 encores. A fan pulled on stage to dance. 8,000 people who had come to a classical music venue and gotten something they would remember for the rest of their lives. The police, who had moved to the sides, watched a rock singer from Port Arthur, Texas, pull a stranger onto the stage of the Boston Symphony Orchestra's summer home and dance. They did not intervene. Here is what this story asks you. Have you ever had a moment where you knew the conditions weren't right, and instead of compromising, you simply waited? Not loudly, not publicly. Just, this isn't ready yet. I'll wait. Janis Joplin looked at the police at the front of the stage and decided she would not perform until they moved. She didn't yell. She didn't make a speech. She didn't threaten anyone. She just stood backstage with her arms crossed and waited for the conditions to become what she needed them to be. They did. She walked out. She played 2 encores. She pulled someone onto the stage of Tanglewood to dance. The Boston Symphony Orchestra had conducted there for 30 years. Janis Joplin walked out there once, for one Tuesday night in the summer of 1969, and made 8,000 people rush the stage. She just needed the police to move first. Subscribe. The next story goes somewhere nobody has taken you before.